Well, hello, my lovely listeners. Sending you all a very happy Valentine's Day on this 14th of February when this episode drops into your feed. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are either having someone splurging on overpriced flowers for you, or you are splurging on overpriced flowers for yourself, because that's the sort of world we live in. So, welcome to episode 169 of the Assist with Impact podcast. And today's episode is an interview. Yes, it is an interview that I recorded towards the end of last year, and it is with a fellow Aussie or Aussie, or however you might pronounce it in whatever neck of the woods you live in or come from in this global world that we live in. But yes, my guest today is the wonderful Ruth Kilah, who, although we are fellow Aussies and we don't actually live that far apart, because of that funny thing, or not so funny thing, called the global pandemic, COVID-19, we actually have never met face to face. So we did this podcast interview via Zoom at the end of last year, and I didn't want to release it any earlier this year because, you know, I was just sort of releasing my episodes getting into 2023, and I wanted to just give the episode, the interview, the proper space that it deserved. So what better time than to drop it on Valentine's Day as a little love letter, not just to Ruth for being so patient for the episode to be released, but also to all of you out there, my wonderful listeners, bringing you my episode with Ruth Kilah. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Ruth. Ruth Kilah is the founder and CEO of Hoxton Hyde. She is an Australian-based, international executive assistant coach and mentor, an international speaker. Ruth provides one-to-one and group coaching programs for assistants. She specialises in helping assistants become strategic thinkers and operators. As a former senior EA and project manager, Ruth has over 13 years' experience in managing time for C-suite executives in Australia and in the United Kingdom, predominantly for large global corporations. I want you to listen to this interview to hear Ruth share, firstly, her background and how she came to go from Australia to the UK and her experience navigating the career spider frame. She also outlines her approach to working with assistants, what motivated her to establish Hoxton Hyde, and the origins of her business name, Hoxton Hyde. Ruth also shares her 3 top tips for upping your effectiveness when it comes to being a strategic partner to your business leader, to your manager. And Ruth also shares a bonus tip that I think is pure gold. And it really fits in beautifully with my linchpin model, particularly in that zone that is about helping you in terms of building your leader insights. So make sure you listen right to the end of the episode, because she shares her 3 tips and then she shares this additional bonus tip. And you will be able to find the show notes, all of the ways that you can connect with Ruth via Instagram, LinkedIn, and also how you can join the Extraordinary Executive Assistants free Facebook community that Ruth has. So, with no further ado, I want you to enjoy my wonderful interview that I had so much fun and such a lovely time recording. So, enjoy this interview with Ruth. Hello, I'm Liz Van Vliet, and welcome to the Assist with Impact podcast. Join me as I explore the competencies and capabilities that allow you to assist with impact. I'll be sharing practical tips, strategies, and insights that will help you move beyond what I call the order taker zone and be that little hinge that can swing big doors. If you're ready to be more proactive and have more impact in your role, then this is the place for you. Let's get started with the episode. Well, hello, Ruth Kilah. It is so lovely to have a fellow Aussie on the podcast. Welcome to the Assist with Impact podcast.
Hello, Liz. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. And as is so often been the case on this podcast becomes my way of meeting people out there in the admin world, in the admin educator world that I have had, connected with online, but we're all busy. And as we were discussing before we got on and started the podcast interview, we've connected online, but we haven't had the pleasure of meeting face to face, and we haven't even jumped on a Zoom call. So this is we're getting, bang for our buck in doing this interview. We're getting to meet and connect and get to know each other, and I'm getting to share you with my lovely listeners. So thank you for giving up your time.
All pleasure's all mine. Lovely to connect.
Well, thank you for being here. So I always love to start these interviews with getting my guests to tell the listener about their experience navigating the career spider frame, as I call it. And my listeners know what I mean by that. Do you know what I mean by the career spider frame?
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
So why don't you tell the listeners about your experience on the career spider frame?
So I, after high school, went to university and studied business management, funnily enough in tourism and hospitality industry and sector. And I, after graduating, went over and worked in London, and we worked in the hospitality industry for about a year when my role was made redundant. So I quickly got a very quick introduction into losing roles and redundancy in a very early part in my career. At the time, I was early 20s, and I thought it was fantastic. I just got a big payout and decided I was going to go traveling around Europe. So
bonus.
Yeah, I know, it was fantastic. So after packing up my bag, went traveling around Europe for a couple of months, came back to London, decided that actually I wanted to try something different than the hospitality industry. So I was working originally in sales and in the hotel industry in London, and decided that I wanted to branch out and go into corporate space. Had no experience whatsoever in that area. So made a decision to enter into temporary or contracting or temping work in London, which I think is such it's a very popular way of working in London because it is a big city and there's lots of temping opportunities. But it was for me, it was fantastic because I was able to climb the admin career ladder, so to speak, very quickly, because I took on, 2-week roles here, and the next role was 2 weeks or 4 weeks. So I very quickly climbed that ladder. I'm saying inverted commas here. And within 6 months, I went into a EA to CEO role. That was kind of my introduction, very speedy introduction into the admin, professional admin space. From there, I was EA to CEO, an international board for around, I want to say about 5 years. From there, I transitioned into a stakeholder relationships manager role. That's still within the same organization. And I was there for about another year in that role. And then I made a decision to come back to Australia. And from that point, it was obviously when I left my EA to CEO role when I was in London, I always had this burning desire to further develop my skills and my career, but I didn't know what that looked like or what I could do or where I fitted in necessarily in the future. So I kind of was very open to opportunities in the future. And when I came back to Sydney, I decided to really be intentional in that next step, in terms of where I was going to put my foot and where in terms of that next career step. So I did what I knew best, and that is I went into temping when I went into Australia, came back to Sydney. And I always found that was a really good when I was in London, but also in Sydney, because I got to essentially try before I invested in an organisation, work in an organisation, experience their culture, build a rapport and connection with a leader. And if I found it was a good fit, then I would maybe apply to stay there longer. But a lot of the time, obviously, so I went through a lot of temp roles that I found it wasn't a good fit, so made the next step. So I did a temping for about 4 months, 3-4 months when I was back in Sydney, and then found a temporary role in GE, General Electric, Sydney for Australia and New Zealand at the time. And it was a temporary role supporting the Chief Financial Officer and Vice President of Communications at the time. And I knew, obviously, the GE General Electric at the time was a very large global organization, and I made the deliberate step at that and choice then to go for an EA role supporting 2 executives rather than EA to CEO role again, where I felt I had been, and I wanted to really broaden my skill set and my knowledge in business across the board. And I knew that both supporting those roles was going to be really diverse and I would have broad access to the organization and obviously opportunities as well. So it was a very intentional step. And I was with GE for 6 years, and I absolutely adored working in that organization. Through that entire time, I always kept the role of EA to the CFO, but I also, in that time, supported the CIO as well, and also took on a project management role as well, in addition to at later stages in the career as well. So,
and were those secondary leaders reporting into the CFO?
The CIO and the Vice President of Communications, no, they were reporting into this and the CEO.
Okay, yep. Interesting. Okay,
yes, absolutely,
yep.
Yes,
cool.
Yeah. So the position and the information that came across my desk every day was just was fascinating, and the project and initiatives that I was able to sink my teeth into within that role were very diverse, and I found it fascinating, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. And it wasn't until the end of my time at General Electric that I was involved in a big project management role, driving business priority projects for the CEO office. And it was through that I grew the passion and an idea to start my own business, where I am now, right, in terms of starting Hoxton Hyde.
And if I read your LinkedIn profile, so you went and did a project management qualification, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
I did. But a lot of as an executive assistant, you're already a project manager.
I know. Yeah, I talk
already
to
a project manager
about that all the time. But having done that, I've also, in my coaching, I've also encouraged assistants to go and do various, which project management qualification did you do? I know it was some time ago.
Yeah, it was through the University of Sydney.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was the university, I forget what it's called, but it was through University of Sydney. I forget when the title. It's on my LinkedIn page if anyone wants to follow it. I've linked it on my LinkedIn profile though. But it was it was a good course. It was a good course, but I found that it was good because there was a lot of people within that program that were from diverse backgrounds. So I learned a lot more, just not from obviously from the teacher, but obviously from those in the room as well.
And as you just pointed out, it sounded like it reinforced to you the knowledge that you already had, that you were already doing project management and you already had this knowledge. You just hadn't actually joined the dots in terms of the skill set that you had already developed through osmosis of actually doing those things, but not actually aligning them in terms of skill set with being a project manager.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always tell, when assistants ask me, should I go and get a certification in this or a degree in that? And I say, well, first of all, go and do the thing that you're interested in doing.
Yeah.
And for me, I was at one stage thinking about doing that myself in terms of getting a degree or getting further and going down the project management path. And I thought, hang on, let's just explore this. Let's actually get involved in this space first, which is what I did for 2 years in the project management space. And it was through that process that I realized that I actually didn't want to further progress that learning, that space. I wanted more. For me, I wanted to start a business. So had I gone through that 2-year period and gone, you know what, this is fantastic, I want more, I would have further invested in that learning. Absolutely. But I think getting involved in that space, first of all, and really seeing if this is for you, because I know a lot of people who have got into the space and gone, hang on, actually, I want something else out of this. I want something more here, or it's not for me. But equally, realize it is for them. So it's a really good, I always say, just get involved in whatever it is that you want to learn more about.
Yeah.
And then look into further learning and development in terms of, a degree or what have you, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, great point. So in terms of what you're doing now, you mentioned, so Hoxton Hyde is your business.
Yeah.
So I am fascinated. Where did the business name come from?
Well, for those who obviously picked up in what I explained earlier, that I lived in London for a substantial amount of time, I lived in obviously in London, and I worked in. For those who are living in London and who've lived in London before, I worked in Bank, the suburb, in the city of London. So I regularly went out and frequented Hoxton Square, which is a square where everyone in summer's beautiful. We go and socialise, and it was a very vibrant space. And it was a space where I used to always go and socialise with a friend after work. And Hoxton, that being Hoxton part, and then Hyde is always Hyde Park, where it was a big moment within my career, in that halfway point that I suffered a burnout phase within my role, and had to pivot and change how I was operating in my role. And it was through that time that I actually decided to take part in a marathon, training for a marathon. And through that phase, I also used to train and run a lot around Hyde Park. So I've used the mash of 2 words there in terms of the crazy business financial district in London to the calm and serene and health focus of Hyde Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's something else that listeners may not know about you that I picked up from your bio, that you have a personal training
certified
qualification.
Personal trainer. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So now, was that something that happened pre-kids, post?
Free, yeah. So this is another thing that I always say to assistants, and just explore. Don't have to, it doesn't have a label, or you don't have to commit to anything. Just explore what you're interested in. And I was always interested and have always been interested in fitness. And it was when I was working at GE in the later part of my career, I was wanting to do something else. So I decided to explore personal training, decided to study a certification in personal training. And I thought, well, I'll just do this even for my own benefit. Even if I don't further explore this from, on a professional side, I would just do it for my own benefit and learning more about fitness and how to exercise and effectively from my own personal gain, but and having further and deeper knowledge of the space. So it was a fantastic thing to do just for interest's sake.
And are you still a runner?
No, I don't run. I've got shocking knees now. So through personal training qualification, I know now some other very effective ways to keep fit. So,
well, I can tell the listeners that I'm looking at Ruth on the screen and she's glowing with good health. So whatever she's doing, I want some of it. Well, that is fascinating. Okay, so in terms of what you do at Hoxton Hyde, how would you describe Hoxton Hyde? What is your differentiator?
So through my one-to-one and group coaching programs, I help assistants to think and operate strategically with a strategic lens so they can progress their roles to a higher level, whether that be an executive business partner and or beyond. So I found through working with a lot of my clients, it started, obviously progressing to an executive business partner level, but a lot of my clients are now progressing further than that. So it's obviously I found that a lot of assistants have so much potential. And as you would know, Liz, through the global skills matrix, was it like 60% of assistants, want to, don't see there being further development for themselves in an organization. And a lot of assistants, they want to progress their roles further. They want to expand their learning, but they might not see their potential. They might not see where they can fit in the future. So a lot of what I do is helping them build that strategic lens, whether it is to establish a strong partnership with their executive and move into that executive business partner lens, or onto something else.
Fantastic. Well, why I think listeners would love you to share, just maybe give them a taster for maybe 3 ways that you help your clients do that.
So first would be clarity. Really strong clarity of an organization's goals and objectives. I think as an assistant, if you have a really strong, deep understanding of what the company is trying to achieve and how they are planning to achieve those goals, it's really going to help you in the day-to-day prioritizing of tasks and execution of those tasks when you have that context.
Yep.
The second would be communication. No, you would agree with this.
We are singing from the same songbook, sister.
Communication, just so much communication, a regular dialogue. And I'm not just saying on business terms, but also establishing that really strong dialogue with your leader, your executive, your principal, in terms of not just on a business terms, but also, establishing rapport, building a really great, strong relationship that will really build trust over the years. So, and when I say years, that's because a lot of assistants obviously are in their roles for years and years of supporting executive, not all, but it's very common. So very much communication. I can't underestimate that one enough, and underline that one enough, because the more you ask questions, the more you talk, the more you communicate, the more opportunity there is for further learning, rapport building, and also a greater enjoyment in your level of work and level of engagement. If you understand what's going on in the organization, and a stronger partnership with your executive, you're going to enjoy your role more. Yeah.
Yep.
And the third being aligning your goals as an assistant to the organization goals and objectives.
What does that look like?
This will help you to communicate your value. And this is something I see repetitively with a lot of clients, only because, and I can say that for myself in my early part of my assistant career, is that a lot of assistants, they're absolute rock stars, absolute guns, run circles around me in terms of their ability and the value that they deliver. But they really struggle to effectively communicate their value and to sell themselves in their role, which holds them back from opportunities in development and holds them back from being seen as such a humongous contributor within their organization. And I always say to assistants, I say, don't make it vanilla. I said, just make it, chocolate, fudge ice cream with sprinkles on top and a sparkler in the top. You want to make it sing.
Yeah.
And basically your written and your verbal communication of how you talk about your role and the value you contribute.
I love that. That's a great. I'm a visual person, and I'm imagining that bowl of ice cream with a sparkler in the middle. That's brilliant. I'd be very happy if that was presented to me. That's brilliant. They're 3 great tips. Thank you. That's brilliant. So in terms of what you have on the agenda for Ruth Kilah and Hoxton Hyde in 2023, tell us about that. What are we going to see?
Oh my goodness. I've got a few things planned in the works, which will probably be announced in early next year. But I have my one-to-one programs, and also my group program, the Strategic Executive Assistant, which I take a small amount of people each month. And this is obviously an open enrolling program, group development program, over 12 months, which the entire objective of that program is to help assistants progress into higher level roles of executive business partners and or beyond. So that program will continue into next year, as well as my one-to-one programs as well.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, and obviously, I have listeners both here in Australia and overseas.
Yeah.
And in terms of your programs, you already have, I'm assuming, both participants locally and internationally.
Oh yeah. So the Strategic Executive Assistant program, there are people in that program from New Zealand, Australia, Switzerland, the US, Canada, and Russia.
Wow.
Literally, very
exciting.
I have clients one-to-one and group as well. I have clients globally. So yeah, absolutely. And it's a beautiful, the group program is a beautiful mix of, of cultures and people learning and sharing their experience at really progressing their role and the trials and tribulation that come with it, and their, what they're learning out of the experience as well. And although they're going through, similar journeys in terms of their progression, they're all, being able to share their different experiences and what they're learning from their, each of these steps in their maybe a wrong direction and what you can learn from that. And also the wins as well, be able to celebrate the wins inside that community.
Yeah.
Big, strong
point for them. That's beautiful. I love that. Fantastic. Well done, Ruth. So how long has Hoxton Hyde been how long have you been running Hoxton Hyde?
So I started the business in 2018 when I had only just given birth to my daughter. And yes,
nothing
so
like a project with a newborn.
I didn't stop. So I was on maternity leave. I hadn't even given birth to my daughter yet. And I started that business, and it was after my role from GE got made redundant. And that's what I chose to do with my when I left that role. So in 2018 I decided to start the business, and I knew very early on that building your brand and keeping your presence online and in the market was very critical. And I knew at that point that I wanted to start working, and I was at that stage doing a lot of public speaking for executive assistant conferences, and I was running workshops, but very ad hoc basis. And that was a very deliberate ploy on my behalf, was not to grow the business at that stage because of my impending motherhood, but to really to maintain my presence online and in the market as well. So
sure.
It was for the first couple of years, very much so. I tried to keep on the back burner and not grow my business and not make any too much noise, but just to, so I knew that as soon as I got going, I knew that I would have, people would want to work with me. So I don't know why I said that. I said the level of confidence because I know that I have value to give, but I knew that once I got going, I would want to put all in. As you can see from me starting a business, I would, I want to go all in. So if I started promoting the business too much, then I would want to go all in. And obviously I want to enjoy motherhood at the time. So yeah, so it's over the last 18 months, I would say. It's 18 months, 2 years. It's probably that's when I started to grow the business.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, congratulations on all that you've achieved and the assistance that you've been able to, I saw a lovely reel the other day on Instagram of one of your participants, and your reaction was so beautiful. It was so genuine and authentic. You were so happy for them. It was lovely to see.
Yes,
so shocked me. I want to finish off by asking you to recommend for my listeners, because I have listeners, as you know, who are, who sort of in terms of their role may not be EAs. They are maybe some other form of administrative professional, some other form of assistant. So if you had to recommend to them a resource that you think any form of admin professional should have on their list, either their reading list or their listening list or their watching list, what would be something that you would be recommending?
It's hard to say one.
I know.
Well, this podcast, obviously, Liz.
I'll pay you later, Ruth.
I did the right thing to say. Look, I have a free community for in Facebook, which is Extraordinary Executive Assistant, which I'm sure will be in the show notes.
Yes.
But, I always say to admins, assistants, read what your executives are reading.
Oh, great advice.
Read what they're reading. There are so many wonderful books and podcasts, including this one as well, obviously, for assistants, but you're going to start seeing the world a lot differently when you start reading business books, journals, papers that your executive is reading. Yes, at first you're probably going to pick it up and think, what is this all about? But I encourage you to persevere, and this can be a lot to be learnt, especially with repetitive exposure to content at that level. You're going to absorb, whether you like it or not. You won't realize it, but you will absorb it.
That's a great tip. Thanks, Ruth. Now, I will be putting all the links in the show notes for things that you have suggested. So if listeners would like to get in touch with you or find out more about your programs, where should they go?
So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, which is Ruth Kilah.
I will put the link in the show notes.
You can always also reach out to me and join the free community, Facebook community, Extraordinary Executive Assistants, and also on LinkedIn. Instagram. Yeah. Instagram, so much social. Instagram, which is
on the gram.
Hoxton Hyde, all one word.
Okay, I will put all those links in the show notes for listeners to connect with you. I loved your explanation of Hoxton, of the origins of Hoxton Hyde, because now that I know that, I feel all warm and fuzzy thinking about it, because I've spent time in London, and I'm going to have to look up Hoxton Park, but I obviously know Hyde Park. Hoxton Square. Yeah. I know Hyde Park, and when I spent about, it was less than 12 months in living on Kensington High Street when I was there with my husband and my oldest daughter when she was about between 6 and about 14 months. And I used to take her around Kensington Gardens and Hyde Park in the jogger pram. So very fond memories. And now that every time I think about you, I'm going to be thinking of Hyde Park. So Hoxton Square, I'll be looking up where Hoxton Square is now.
Yeah.
So that's great that must be lovely to have that connection every time you think of your business.
Yeah. It's don't ask me how I got to that.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
I was trying to think, what do you call it when you combine two words? It's not quite a palindrome. I think it's called a palindrome when you combine two words, but it's virtually that sort of thing. So it's lovely.
Yeah. Bit of fun.
Well, it's been absolutely lovely meeting you virtually face to face, and I will look forward to actually getting together with you literally face to face in 2023. We're going to have to get together.
We'll have to catch up in Sydney.
Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.